In a land of sorrow and bitter cold, a tale of sacrifice will be told.
Hey everybody! We're gonna be talking about yet another JRPG in this video, and this time it's I Am Setsuna. Now, this game was supposed to be some sort of homage to old SNES RPGs, and it was advertised as such. However, honestly, to me, this is more of a PS1 RPG than anything else. It looks and feels like a PS1 RPG, so let's take a look at the game and see what makes it good, what makes it bad. Now, this ain't a perfect game by any means. It's not a bad game either. I Am Setsuna is a game that has a very unique feel and atmosphere to it, for a JRPG at least. It's a game set in a world covered in snow, and the way the visuals and music come together, it really manages to create this unique and beautiful snowy atmosphere. The game's atmosphere also is supposed to go hand in hand with its theme, which is sadness, and supposedly the name of the game itself implies sadness in Japanese. Now, I don't understand Japanese, so I couldn't tell you why, but that's what I've heard and that's what I read. And, of course, because of this, most of the characters' stories and subplots, they all revolve around sad or tragic events in a way. So guys, before getting into gameplay and talking why I like or dislike the gameplay, we're going to talk a little bit about the story, because story is the most important aspect of a JRPG to me. Now, I will say this, I Am Setsuna does not have a very good story presentation, even if its backstory is pretty nice. It's not really original. We've seen the story where a girl has to sacrifice herself to save the world from monsters many times. In fact, while I was playing I Am Setsuna, I was also playing Knights of Azure. That game had pretty much a similar base plot. Then we have Final Fantasy X, we had other games as well, so that's nothing new, and that's not a problem for me. I mean, a story doesn't have to be overly original or original at all for it to be good, if it's well presented. The problem with I Am Setsuna is that, in my opinion, its world and story presentation are rather bare bones. That's not to say that there is no character development, it's just that it's pretty basic. There is a lack of good quality character and quality world building, something that, for example, a game such as Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky does absolutely perfectly. So I can not compare I Am Setsuna to such a game, because both are low-budget titles, except this one has serious issues with its story presentation. Then there's the fact that, in my opinion, the writing itself is rather basic as well. It conveys just enough information to let you know what's going on with the story, what's going on with the characters, but it doesn't add that extra layer of depth that makes the characters feel real, that makes them grow on you, and makes them feel like real people you are out on an adventure with. So, I personally didn't really care much about the characters, or at least I didn't care as much as I would in a better written RPG. So that's a problem. I understand that this is a short game, but just because the game itself is short, and just because the story itself isn't very complex, doesn't mean that you can't add complexity and depth to your characters who carry this story. Because the story itself may not be overly original, but you could add so much more to the characters to make them feel alive and make people care about them a lot more. So, despite the game having pretty interesting characters, due to the basic writing and just, in my opinion, lackluster story presentation, I never quite connected to the characters, the world, or felt all that sad when tragic events would take place in the story. However, don't get the wrong idea, this is by no means a game I did not enjoy. If I didn't enjoy the game, I wouldn't have played it from start to finish and bothered reviewing it. Because if I don't like a game, I don't play it and I don't review it. Why waste my time? So, I Am Setsuna does have an enjoyable little story, does have enjoyable characters. It's just, the game leaves so much to be desired in terms of story and story presentation. I already mentioned that the game is set in a world covered in snow. And as you can see from gameplay footage, there is not much else to the world other than snow and some more snow. That wouldn't be a problem had the world been presented better. Much like the story, the world itself is rather basic, and I feel that a lot more could have been done with a world covered in snow. This is not a problem with the game being a low-budget title. This is a problem with the game's creators, in my opinion, lacking imagination and creativity. Because you have a world covered in snow that's just so much that can be done with it. It doesn't have to all look the same. It doesn't have to all feel the same. This is a huge problem because even towns or villages that could have been so much more are practically nothing. I mean, if they really wanted to mimic SNES games, they should have just made the game 2D. There was nothing wrong with Chrono Trigger. It looks beautiful to this day, and its world is far richer and more expensive than I'm Setsuna's world. So, they were advertising this game as being some sort of, I don't know, homage to Chrono Trigger or what have you, or inspired by Chrono Trigger. This is not Chrono Trigger, right? The world is simpler. The storyline is much more poorly presented. So, where is Chrono Trigger? I don't see Chrono Trigger here. Yeah, the battle system has similarities, but that's where it ends. Chrono Trigger has multiple endings. Chrono Trigger has multiple paths. Chrono Trigger is a game that is mind-blowingly amazing to this day, and it hasn't aged a day. Don't get me started on the dungeons themselves. I mean, they might be well designed in terms of where you go and what you do, but they lack diversity, they lack creativity once again, right? All they do is change up the colors here and there, and you have several dungeons that keep repeating themselves and only the layout changes. I'm playing, for example, right now I'm playing Wild Arms Ultra Code F, and that game, while having terribly written story and characters, at least it offers a ton of fun when it comes to dungeon exploration and just dungeon gameplay. I'm Setsuna does not have that. So we have a problem here. We have a problem with the world, and we have a problem with the gameplay. That's not too serious or too severe for the game to not be enjoyable, but it's bad enough for the game to feel like it could have been so much more. And once again, it being a low-budget title is no excuse by any means. We talked about story, we talked about world presentation, so let's take a look at gameplay a little bit. Now, one thing I'm Setsuna does perfectly well is the battle system. This is a battle system that is definitely reminiscent of Chrono Trigger, however, it builds upon that and improves it even further so. We are looking at a semi-turn-based battle system where the player characters and the enemies take their turns as soon as their gauges fill up. Now, these gauges fill up even while the player cycles through the menu to choose their next attack or action. However, for those who would rather prefer a more turn-based battle system, they can set the game so that the gauges do not fill up and enemies don't take their turns while the player uses the menu and decides on their next action, which is how I personally prefer to play these games. One thing I really enjoyed about the battle system and what really made combat satisfying for me were the momentum actions. What this is basically if you let a secondary gauge fill up after the initial turn gauge has filled up, you are able to perform a so-called momentum action. This means that whatever it is you've done, whether it's attacking or casting a spell, is going to be amplified and it's going to be much stronger. An attack might even spread to multiple enemies and so forth. So in order to do this, you have to do a little bit of a quick time event and press a button at just the right moment when a flash comes up right before your character attacks or what have you. And this really makes combat feel a little bit more impactful and more satisfying, at least to me. Now, there is a bit of a strategy here, but you have to mind when you use in certain battles, not in all battles, you have to mind when you use momentum actions or regular attacks. However, for the most part, you're probably going to always want to use momentum actions and deliver blows as strong as possible, unless you are hunting for specific materials. Which leads us to another fairly interesting game mechanic that I'm Setsuna has that I enjoyed at first and later down the line found that annoying when I actually had to make use of this system a little bit more. You see guys, in order to get the items you really want or need from monsters you defeat in battle, you have to mind how you kill those monsters, meaning that the way you defeat the monsters you face in combat is going to affect the items they drop at the end. So whether you used regular attacks or different types of spells, momentum actions, whatever your final blow or combination of spells and your final blow was, is going to earn you different types of materials. This is all well and good until you get overleveled or very strong and you have to go back and fight some weaker monsters that need to be defeated a certain way for you to earn whatever materials you need, and you can't do that because you're too strong for those monsters and you always end up overkilling them. So there is a way around this. You can increase the game's difficulty, which makes weaker monsters more difficult to kill, and that gives you a chance to kill them in different ways. However, to do that you need to track down an NPC in a hidden village in the game, which you can get to after you get your airship. And there, once you increase the difficulty, you should be able to defeat those monsters in ways that you need for the materials required for the skills that you want to acquire. So, combat is a lot of fun, and that means that leveling up was fairly enjoyable to me to a certain point, until I got bored and got a trainer and bumped my level up to save on time. However, leveling up alone doesn't really make you all that strong in the game. Your equipment is far more important than just your level. Of course, your level is important, but it's not as important as your equipment. You need to have good weapons. You need to have good accessories and have just the right accessories for just the right situation. The same goes for your skills. You need to understand that your weapons can be and have to be upgraded by using rare materials you find throughout the game. Of course, if you do so choose to overlevel, the game lets you do that because it keeps giving you the same strong monsters that earn you a lot of experience to kill over and over, so you can just keep doing that for as long as you have patience for it. And if you're on PC, you can just make the game give you a little bit more experience, so leveling should go by faster. But, you have to understand the game's equipment system, you have to understand its battle system if you're going to do well. So leveling up alone won't save you. Setsuna is a game that is fairly rich in skills that your characters can equip in order to get some interesting combo attacks from your party members, you have to equip different kinds of skills to your characters, and depending on the combination of skills you have equipped and the characters you use in combat, since you can only use 3 characters in battle, you're going to get different kinds of combo attacks. So part of the fun is figuring out which skills you want to have equipped on which character and see just what kind of results they yield in combat. And this right here is where those materials I mentioned earlier come into play. So what it all comes down to is that these materials you gather are crafting materials. You sell these crafting materials to NPCs who can create skill gems for you. And you need those skill gems because they contain all sorts of different skills that you're gonna need for battle. So all you have to do is dump all of your non-cooking materials onto these NPCs so they can craft the gems you need. And you want to keep your cooking materials, which are highlighted in green, so that you can exchange them with different NPCs throughout the game for cooking recipes, which in turn you give to certain NPCs who can cook for you, and then you can buy food from these NPCs regardless of whether or not you have cooking materials for those recipes anymore. So that's all there is to the crafting system in the game. It's very simple, it's very intuitive, and I'm glad it's as simple as it is because honestly I do not enjoy complex crafting systems in video games. However, Setsuna is not as simple as it seems on the surface. You can even upgrade your skills through a rather convoluted system that the game never properly explains. However, it turns out that it's a very simple and easy system to understand. There's just a lot of randomness involved in it, and you can, if you want to, you can get into it. There are some guides and explanations on YouTube which are fairly straightforward. My point is, Setsuna has a ton of depth to it, which isn't mandatory for you to get into, but if you so choose to explore these systems it offers, you can do so. And That's what makes the gameplay very, very good. Now, as I said, dungeons might not be anything special, but they're well designed. Combat is absolutely wonderfully designed, and the game has systems in place that give it a lot of depth. So we talked about the game's crafting mechanics, we talked about combat, and now I think it's time to talk a little bit about the environments that combat takes place in. For the most part, combat takes place in dungeons, unless you're fighting some scripted battles that are in certain villages and so forth. The game's world map or overworld doesn't have any monster encounters, which is a good thing. The dungeons themselves, while not very imaginative when it comes to their appearance, are fairly well designed in terms of their layout, meaning that I didn't find myself getting lost all that often in them, even though the game doesn't really give you any systems like mini-maps or anything really to make dungeon navigation easier. So, in that regard, I'm fairly happy with the dungeon's design. There are some simple puzzles in some of the dungeons that honestly repeat themselves fairly often, and while they are somewhat entertaining, ultimately they aren't very memorable or very complex, and the fact that they're not complex is a good thing. However, the fact that they're not all that fun, not so much so. There's a lot that could have been done with these dungeons that I Am Setsuna simply does not do. As far as aesthetics go, I Am Setsuna is a rather visually pleasing game, and it also has a very beautiful, relaxing piano soundtrack that helps create an absolutely wonderful atmosphere. Now, if only the developers were a little bit more creative with the world and the locations you visit, this game could have been absolutely gorgeous to look at, because they definitely do pay a lot of attention to detail. For example, as you walk through the snow, you leave tracks behind, and there's something very unique and very special about the way colors are combined, especially in exterior environments and forests and such. There's something almost nostalgic about the environment, the music, the whole atmosphere of the game. And I don't mean nostalgic in the sense that it reminds me of old RPGs, which it does not. Something nostalgic about the world, something that I've seen in my childhood, and that's just amazing. Now, I might have sounded a little bit angry earlier in the review, and I might have been a bit overly critical of this game. However, that is because I genuinely love I Am Setsuna as a game. And I feel bad, I feel absolutely terrible that it does not realize its full potential, because there is a lot here that could have made I Am Setsuna not just a great RPG, but one of the best JRPGs of all time, if only they took the time to write the characters better, they took the time to develop the world better, and made the world look and feel a little bit more unique in some areas. Bottom line is, I Am Setsuna is a very nice game. I would not recommend it to people new to JRPGs. It's not as simple and as easy for people who are not used to these type of games. However, I definitely do recommend it to people who love Japanese RPGs, and it's a game that they should give a chance. Just know that you're not going to get Chrono Trigger out of this game, but you're going to get a very nice RPG regardless. So I hope you'll give the game a chance, check it out, buy it during a sale, or maybe buy it at full price if you think it's worth it. And I'll say one thing that I often say about digital releases, and it's a dang shame I Am Setsuna did not get a physical release outside Japan, because the Japanese version has one of the most beautiful box arts I've ever seen in a video game. It's just such a simple and gorgeous box art. It's a real shame that they did not release the physical version of the game outside Japan. So, well, that's about it, guys. Hope you enjoy the game if you decide to play it.